Justin brought up a topic to me before we went live that is a fascinating topic concerning the approach of Matt Rhule and Deion Sanders. And of course, these two coaches met on the field, and their two teams will meet on the field again this fall. And while last year's result was pretty inconsequential because both teams fell far short of bowl play and so forth, it is a look into where we stand with college football coaches. And of course, Deion bringing a very different approach. And I think Justin and I will have much to say about some of the facts and figures that we're going to bring to light based on the USA Today article. And again, I thank Justin for bringing this to the table here. So since Matt Rhule took the job in Lincoln in November 2022, he has visited 108 high schools, and he has made 486 off-campus contacts with potential recruits, including 123 this past December and January, according to records obtained by USA Today Sports. And so that is Matt Rhule's approach to building a program. He's a grinder. He is going to get out there. He is going to meet the players on their turf. He is going to be a go-getter. By contrast, before I read off these numbers, we've got Deion Sanders, of course, at Colorado taking the job right about the same time. Can anybody guess in the chat? In the chat, please guess how many.
Without looking at the article.
Yes. Guess how many off-campus recruiting trips compared to 108. He visited 108 high schools and 486 off-campus contacts.
Yep.
Compare that to Deion Sanders. So give a guess on how many off-campus visits and recruiting trips Deion Sanders has made in that same time span. Does anybody have a guess?
We got
versus 108 high schools and 486 recruiting contacts.
We have 859 so far, 26.
Yeah, so you guys are right on with the thought process here that it doesn't even compare, right? That Deion Sanders is barely getting out there, and while Matt Rhule is all over the place, really going after these recruits. So the numbers you have thrown out there, I would consider to be really good guesses because you're on the money in terms of the thought process. But you know what the number is? 0.
Yep.
Deion Sanders has not left campus to visit any high school football recruits.
Yep. And we'll get into some of the quotes and the difference of philosophies in a second that they had on there. But yeah, 0.
It's amazing.
0. And, they asked the question, is off-campus recruiting as necessary today as before with the portal? And the question there, yes, that is a fair question to raise, right? But just because the importance of something is lessened doesn't mean you just throw it in the trash can altogether. And, so they're just at two different extremes, right? Matt Rhule is very much foundational and still believes in his way. And that's what's made him successful. So there's no reason for him to venture outside of that. He's very much about culture, family, building. And the way you build is you get high schoolers that you can have and develop over time. Again, he's not one of the guys who likes a one-year starter. And so with that, Matt Rhule's found a way to integrate, though, a little bit of both, the high school into the portal, where he uses the portal to attack instant needs, depth, stuff like that we'll need for the following season, but then still recruits heavily for the future. And so in that way, he feels you can build a foundation, and the foundation will help the guys from outside integrate as opposed to trying to bring it all together at one time and in one off season. And so, because we even hear him talk about the transition from last year going from more accountability on the coaches to this year more accountability on the players. Well, that's something that can only come over year. That can't come with 1 year, rentals. And looking at the two classes, they broke them down in there. They're ranked number 22 and 23 respectively. But with Rhule, 32 high school recruits to 6 transfer recruits. Deion, 25 transfer recruits to 10 high school recruits. And, lost Cormani McClain yesterday, who was the coveted prize, the 5-star cornerback to pair with the other 5-star cornerback, Travis Hunter. And so Cormani McClain is leaving. And so they're losing a lot of guys as well. And, what Rhule said was important to him, make sure he shows people respect of coming to their homes and seeing the people that matter to them, and then bringing them on campus to sell them on the family atmosphere. And what Deion was kind of alluding to was, and it's very much the me philosophy that he has. And he says, I very much believe like that parents don't want me at their house. Sanders said on March 20th, they said, March 20th. So they come to see me in my house. They want to come see me, my house. They want to see how I live, how I get down. They want to see what I've got going on, what God has done in my life. And, it's just a very selfish way to go about it, because how do you know what they want? How do you know what their family wants? You just assume their family doesn't want you in their house. I mean, you're Deion Sanders. Like, I'm sure they would welcome you over, and be excited to do so. And then, but the Rhule's philosophy on it, when he's talking about them coming to his house, is he said, I want them to meet my wife and family. And again, that just further drives home the point about culture. And the way somebody says something is very, very telling. And, Matt Rhule didn't even say he wants them to come meet him, see his home. They want him to meet his family because they are part of his family, as he's mentioned before. He said in his press conference, he said, players that play for me forever. And that just adds to the family vibe. But it also shows in the fact that one school's lost 2 people, one school's lost 11, including impact players, And another thing that I saw on Twitter, and this, I'm not sure who else saw this. He posted on Instagram a story, and it said offensive recruits DM Shiloh Sanders, his son. Defensive recruits DM Shiloh, and offensive recruits DM Shadur. So his sons, I guess, are headlining, springboarding the recruiting, which then automatically puts them on a pedestal above everybody else all of a sudden. And I don't understand how anybody expects something to be built there. And so this article just alludes to the difference in philosophies and stuff like that. They said Harbaugh, I don't know if you saw the numbers, where it said Harbaugh, 145 off-campus visits, Brian Kelly, 257, Sarkisian, 128, Chip Kelly, 55. Or UCLA, we saw that went. They talk about Saban was known for his appearances on campus.
And just to interrupt real quick, that's why Chip Kelly's doing what he's doing right now. That's why he's the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. He never liked recruiting, number one. And number two, now it's needed even more with the transfer portal, and he wants nothing to do with that. He wants to coach football. So that's his decision. Yep.
And I almost argue that high school recruiting is important more so in certain ways, because with the transfer portal being growing as much as it is, having these guys just being able to leave on a whim, like, you're not always going to be able to just immediately replace them with transfer guys. So even more so, you want to have these guys that are in place that know the system, that know the philosophies, that know the culture, that know their teammates, to be able to step in that, even if they may not be as talented as the guy ahead of them. All of those things are more likely to close that gap than if you have a guy who's less talented and has to learn all that on the fly all of a sudden. So, it's one of those things where it's like, high school recruiting is very much still important, but it's important in its own ways. And what Rhule likes to do is just bring in the transfers that he knows are gonna make an instant impact, guys that he knows fit his, philosophy. And another thing too is, Deion likes high school recruits that are, elite out of high school. And Matt Rhule likes guys that are elite athletes, but raw in terms of technique and fundamentals, because again, he believes there's a ceiling for athleticism, but there's not a ceiling for skills. And that's what he likes to build upon. Where I think Deion just really likes to build his brand and have big name players and players that he thinks can come in and be successful immediately. And if they're not, see ya, there's a door. So that right there was my overarching point of that. What's your take on that?
So if this were 10 years ago and this was not Deion Sanders involved, I would be completely on Rhule's end of the spectrum, completely, because there's just no way high school recruiting was the complete lifeblood of any program, and it still is and needs to be to a large degree for a couple different reasons. You're still most likely, even with all the transfers that we are seeing, if you look at the best teams in the nation, they still are built by, and the majority of the roster, especially the better players on the roster, are still the guys that they recruited and signed out of high school.
Correct.
So that's one point. The next one would be if this situation with NIL, and regardless of who grabs control of the landscape of college football, whether that's the NCAA or, as most people believe, it's going to be some kind of partnership between the SEC and the Big Ten or whomever else is involved, they're going to get a hold of what we're seeing right now and build some type of structure. There's still going to be player movement, but it's going to be more controlled. The one thing that I noticed in going through all these transfers over the last 2 days, we are seeing more and more players who never played for this particular team. They transferred at the end of last season in December. They never played for the team.
Yep.
And now they're transferring again. And I think they're going to clean that up. I think that there's at least going to be a 1-year commitment once there is some type of salary structure in place.
Right.
So just going out there and raiding the transfer portal, I really don't think that that's going to be sustainable. Plus, football is the ultimate team game.
Yeah.
And when you're in the fourth quarter in Iowa City, or pick your spot, Camp Randall Stadium, and it's a tough game, and it basically comes down to, in 25-degree weather, these teams are evenly matched. Who wants it more? Who wants it for the guy next to them more? Again, it's an effort sport.
Mm-hmm.
It's a talent sport. Of course, you've got to have talent. So that's a given. But let's get by the talent. It's an effort sport, and the separation is going to come from the teams that are poised, that are disciplined, but they're also disciplined and poised because they care about what they're doing and they care about the guy next to them. And there is some level of camaraderie. And if the likes of Deion Sanders is throwing together a team every summer that is different, and different guys playing with each other that don't have that 2 and 3 and 4 years together, I don't think that's going to work. The one and so my caveat to being completely on Rhule's side was, number one, that there is a transfer portal that needs to be used, that has changed the acquisition of talent to a certain extent. So you do have free agent fixes that do work. You do
like
have
Ohio State. Like Ohio State's been doing this offseason, right? They made moves that they needed to make, except at running back, they just doubled up. But
if you look at Ohio State, you're basically looking at a team that, to my initial point, is still
built on recruits.
Yeah, the core of their team is still built on these great recruiting classes, but they added a star running back, they added a star safety, and they added their starting quarterback.
Yeah.
That's basically what they needed. and probably will get an offensive lineman or two
Can I
in the
use an
transfer
analogy?
portal.
Can I use an analogy real quick to your
Sure.
point, to double down on it? It almost like people are afraid to compare this to any other sport, but you look at baseball, for instance, right? And I know I'm from Houston. I'm an Astros fan. Okay. However, the Astros built that dynasty because they drafted the core of that team, right? But even then, they still added Justin Verlander in 2017 at the deadline. They still made the moves to get those veteran guys in there that they knew could come in and set them over the top. And that's essentially kind of what you're alluding to. But it's just the college game, and it's called recruiting, and it's not called free agency. It's called transfer portal. It's not called drafting. It's called recruiting, but it's the same concept.
Absolutely. And my last point, somewhat on Dion's side, is that he is a unique commodity. Like Matt Rule can't take over at Nebraska and think he's going to do it like Deion Sanders because he's not Deion Sanders. There's
Correct.
only one of him. And I hate to put him in his own category, but as a character, as
Yeah.
a icon in the sport, and based on what he was able to accomplish as an all-time great cornerback on both levels, he's just different.
Right.
So he can get away with a lot of that. Now, what changes is if you look at a lot of iconic athletes who have become head coaches, if they didn't apply themselves, if Deion Sanders racks up 4-8, 6-6, 5-7, 4-8, then he no longer is Deion Sanders, the great all-time player. He is now just a kind of run-of-the-mill coach, and that's going to wear off if he doesn't back it up with winning.
Correct. He's too busy trying to be prime time and not coach prime like he likes to be called, you know. And so when it comes to, to your point there where it's like trying to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, whenever the season was early on in the season and I talked about their different philosophies back then, one of the things I did mention was that I don't think Deion would have been a successful coach at Nebraska, and I don't know how Matt Rhule would have done at Colorado. And the reason I say that is because it's not that I don't think Matt Rhule could build Colorado, but I think Colorado's the type of program that needed a shot in the arm. Like they can't recruit necessarily off of history, facilities, like campus location. Yes, beautiful campus, right? But Nebraska has a lot of built-in things that they can recruit off of, fan bases and those things. But when it comes to recruiting there, they weren't very good in terms of recruiting classes. So Deion was able to go there, add a lot of excitement, and get players that otherwise would not have been there. I just think there was a lot of collateral on the way he went about it. And I think that collateral is starting to kind of backfire. I talked about before, it didn't seem like he was building any kind of culture of discipline, accountability, or anything like that, and it even came out, a few weeks back whenever Deion got an email from the teachers talking about how the players are just kind of doing their own thing in class, and she recommends that they take online courses only, and that just further shows the lack of discipline and stuff in that program. And I think that's why you're starting to see some of the talent leave because, Cormani McClain, a lot of Colorado fans are saying he lacked discipline and all this other stuff. He was soft. But if Cormani McClain is going in there and not getting developed in the way he wants, and what if he wants to acquire that discipline? What if he wants somebody to guide him there? These are high school kids. We didn't all come out of high school with discipline. We didn't all come out of high school knowing everything. Some of these kids want guidance. And if they're not getting that, it's not something you can just throw away, because not all these guys are going to make it in the NFL. So I think Prime's, deal is selling the fact that he's prime time. You can put him in the NFL, but not all of these kids are going to make it there. And you gotta set these kids up for real life as well. I don't think that's something that's happening. And when it comes to just building the team in general, if you look at an offensive line, and I said this before too, offensive lines can't be built in transfer portal. You can add pieces to an already established offensive line, but an offensive line more than any is a unit, right? They need camaraderie. And so that can be built over time. That can be built, looking at the guy to your right, looking at the guy to your left, and knowing you've been through battle with them. when you try to patchwork 5 guys into an offensive line and you have a spring to kind of bring it together, it's a lot more difficult, because they need to know their quarterback's tendencies. The quarterback needs to know what his offensive line's doing. He needs to know weak spots in his line. He needs to know it's where everything starts. And so yeah, that's my take on just the transfer portal in terms of building, because what was Colorado's biggest weakness last year? Offensive line, and probably going to be an issue this year as well.
I got to say that while Colorado's final record, I was not surprised with. Actually, I think I nailed it to a T, 4-8. It happened somewhat in the inverse way that I anticipated, because that team was so thrown together. I thought, well, it's going to take them a little while to gel. But they've got some very interesting pieces.
Yeah.
It was fun watching them play for a lot of different reasons. But if you just get down to the football of it, Travis Hunter was one of the most exceptional athletes to watch last year on both sides of the ball. But as a cornerback, I don't know how many times I saw him play off his coverage and play off his man and read something, break on the ball, and show the brain to be able to do that, but also had the athleticism to get there to the spot and make a play. He's phenomenal.
Yeah, he's excellent.
Yeah, and so they had pieces on offense. They had a lot of speed and so forth. But it happened in inverse that I expected, because they came out of the gate. They played well.
Yeah.
Now TCU obviously wasn't anything close to what they were the year before, and Colorado State. That was an exciting game and everybody watched it, but that's not a big win. You're beating Colorado State in overtime.
The top 100.
Yeah, that was our indicator that, okay, that was exciting, but it's gonna come crashing down here real soon. And the game against Nebraska,
there was a lot that Nebraska did wrong.
The quarterback position is unlike any other in sports in regards to everybody else can be doing everything right, and if he just throws the ball away, then
yes,
he has sabotaged your drive.
Exactly. Nebraska dominated the first half of that game. Colorado dominated the second half. Well, when Nebraska dominated the first half, they were still down 13-0 because Jeff Sims kept turning it over in their territory or anytime we were about to score. So yeah, that's the game. And then the score was 13-6 up until late in the third quarter. And Nebraska's playing at altitude. Their defense was on the field the whole game, and they're playing at altitude, so they got worn down. That's why the score was a little more lopsided. But yeah, like you said, TCU lost 90% of their offensive talent to the draft after the national championship game.
We're going to be kind to Fong Wei because he's here on a regular basis. He has to be kidding. This has to be an ultimate troll here. You were smarter than that, Fong Wei.
They were ranked outside of the top 100 when they beat Colorado. They are not a good team. But they played up because they hated Colorado. Everybody did.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a flash in the pan. I think Colorado's opening to the season was the best case scenario. They're playing the national championship team off of losing their quarterback, their running back, and their wide receiver to the draft. That was 90% of their offensive production. And then they come out and they're ranked because, of course, but the drop from where they were to where they started the season ranked should have told you how much talent because they were in 14th, something like that. You don't drop from the national championship game to 14th unless something's gone awry. They're not going to drop you out of the rankings, but they're starting to hint you should be there. And that was just one of those things where it was just kind of like they play, everybody was there. It was, lights were shining, all these guys were fresh. And they came out and they started the season hot. But, the thing is, this is where we're going to see the result of what we just talked about, because this coming season, now they've had a year to kind of implement their systems, implement their players, and kind of somewhat build a structure of what it's going to look like. And I will be out there to watch that game in Lincoln. So, but yeah, it's, he said, Deion even came out and said they target guys that are mostly in the portal. And he says, talks about making visits to guys in the portal, making visits to their homes instead. But, again, Matt Rhule said it moves so fast, and that's another thing too. Like these transfer portal guys, as it mentioned, is like they've already gone through the ringer of the high school recruits, like in-home visits and all that. And usually they're trying to transfer and make a decision quickly. They don't have time to sit there and go visit, and have all these coaches come visit and stuff like that. So that philosophy is completely backwards to me. And so you're out there trying to visit guys who have already, I think he's trying to skip the developmental part and try to get guys who already have been developed and focus on his brand. That's my take on it.